The dinner hosts. Wanting to explore the vastness of the desert firsthand, Sam had set off in the morning with the intention to arrive across the frontier by midday until he found himself pursued by a ravenous wolf. Now, having dropped his supplies, the map, and with no means to contact anyone, Sam dragged his feet across the dirt as his eyes met the sight of a lone house in the middle of complete desolation. Apart from the house, the entire vicinity was barren and lifeless. He saw a singular bead of light emitting from inside an open window and approached the front door. However, a trepidation consumed him and found himself unable to bring his knocks to the owner's attention. Before he could allow instinct to carry him elsewhere, the door creaked open. A middle-aged man with a mild stench of rotting eggs stood grinning before Sam. He wore a tweed hat that nearly covered his eyes. His hair was long and blonde, which were parted slightly around the middle, although left most of them covering his face. The man appeared as if his prayers had been answered, beaming at Sam while flashing those yellow teeth. "Come on in, young man." He spread out his arms as if expecting a hug. Enough room for everyone. Before he could explain his situation, Sam was ushered into the house, which reminded him of those abandoned shacks he had ventured into as a dare in his youth. There didn't seem to be any running power, and the room was illuminated by two small flames on a dining table. A large torso of an animal Sam couldn't make out had been served in the middle of a table, much too enormous to seem like a meal for one. His questions were answered when he saw another person move into the light. It was a woman, seeming around the age of the man, and she too carried an expression of welcome as she peered at Sam from behind half-moon spectacles, complemented by silvering strands of hair by the sides of her face. "How lovely, we have a guest." The woman clasped her hands together, registering Sam as if he were her son returning from the war. "Here, you can have the honor seat." This chair was in the middle of the table, close enough to reach the steaming meal, but also in the proximity of both of his hosts if they wanted to reach out to him. Sam took his place as instructed, smiling uncomfortably as the couple continued to beam at him without speaking. After a few seconds of silence where all everyone did was quietly bare their teeth at one another, the man picked up a large knife almost as big as a saw and shoved it towards Sam. His eyes were splattered with red. "So sorry about that." The lady picked herself up in a hurry and dabbed Sam's face. Travis gets a little enthusiastic with the food. Sam wiped his eyes to see a large slice of meat on his plate the man had cut up for him. Giving him a pat on the shoulder to apologize was the splatter. "Give him some room, Terry. He's gotta move his arms." After all, Travis tittered at his wife holding Sam's shoulders for such a prolonged period. She laughed it off and went back to her seat. The couple eyed Sam closely as he picked the fork and stabbed the meat, seeing their faces gleam as he brought it to his lips. He lingered as long as he could, but found no other choice but to swallow. Travis and Terry positively celebrated when they saw this. He slapped the table as if having won a bet. She brought her hand to her chest, her eyes glistening with pride. "It's lovely," Sam commented on the food, which admittedly wasn't bad at all. "You'll have to excuse our enthusiasm." Travis twirled his mustache. "We haven't seen our boy in a few days." "You look so like him," Terry interjected, as if she had been bursting to say this the moment she'd seen Sam. "It's like he's come home." "He must be a very handsome man, then," Sam joked. Travis looked across the table at Terry, who stared back into her plate. Their faces were somber, with neither saying a word after Sam spoke, not even a ghost of a smile. Sam wondered if he had offended them in some way. The silence so pronounced his ears were filled with the sounds of his teeth chewing the meal. "You're right." Travis's voice boomed, startling Sam with the suddenness of his laugh as he bit his tongue painfully. The couple, who had only seconds ago been dead silent, now broke into wheezes, with Sam caught in the middle of their breakdown from composure. It took them more than a few minutes to regain themselves. "He would love to meet you," said Terry. "You'd be the best of friends." "Heck, who says they can't meet? He might swing by any day, maybe tomorrow." Travis banged on the table again. "You might see him in the morning." "Morning?" Sam mumbled. Travis and Terry exchanged glances for a solitary second. Their smiles faltered slightly before laughing again. You think we'll let you out? There's all sorts of madmen out there. I hear some guy's been carrying chainsaws around town and cutting people up. Travis's bellowing voice bounced off the walls of the room. You don't want to be cut up, do you? He added, with such extreme drop in the tone of his voice that he was now staring at Sam. The jolliness in his stature vanished. When Sam shook his head nervously, the couple again broke down laughing. Terry vanished behind a door for a while, with Travis happily cutting up his food on the plate and pointing to Sam to finish his meal, which he did without argument. Terry re-emerged carrying a blanket and a pillow, both snow white as if they had been purchased specifically for Sam. You want to be sleeping, yes? Sam had wanted to request a call, but found himself overwhelmed by drowsiness. The invitation to sleep didn't seem so bad. He accepted the materials and slouched off as Travis supported his weight with one of Sam's arms around him. While he was being taken away, he saw Terry pick up a picture frame and stare into it. Through his weary state, he discerned the words "my son" mouthed by her before he was taken upstairs. Sam was dumped on a spring bed in a room by the end of the corridor on the first floor. There was no power, and the only source of light emanated from a tiny candlelight in the hallway. Travis muttered some words in Sam's ear he was too groggy to understand, although he thought he heard Travis wish him good luck. He drifted away the moment his head rested the mattress, as the darkness in front of his eyes consumed him towards sleep. A soft thud met his ears. What felt like hours later, the room was still dark. The thudding grew louder. Within moments, the thuds were banging up against his ears, and soon, into his skull. The food he'd eaten started taking its toll. Sam felt his bloated stomach deny him movement. He'd been fed too generously. During his attempts to get up, he realized he hadn't been imagining the thuds. The thuds were hitting him in the back of his head. Sam was certain something was attempting to claw toward him from below the bed. Terror gripped him. He had the sensation of a hand piercing into his brain and ripping the insides out. Attempting to escape, Sam could only roll himself, crashing to the floor on his stomach. The nausea from the fall overcame him, and he vomited some of the food out. His fear was only beginning. Tracing the trail of what he'd spewed, he saw a hand reach out from the darkness from under the bed. It swam in Sam's vomit before retracting itself into the shadows. A whirring sound took over the quietness in the air, as if a beast had been awoken from its slumber. Sam expected a roar to follow the increasing sounds of growls escaping from below the bed. And then, he heard it. Food. Within the darkness, two round shapes formed the eyes of the thing that had just spoken. It moved closer until its head poked out. It was a man. A trickle of red, the very same that had escaped Sam's insides, was dripping from the side of his mouth. I'm hungry. Sam wanted to scream. He wanted to run far away. But his bloatedness still had a hold of him, and all he could do was stare back. However, the man brought a finger to his lips when he saw Sam about to scream. And he saw a similar fear in his face. Don't. As Sam noted further, this man's appearance became apparent to him. He was small, had no hair on his head, a full beard that hadn't been trimmed in ages. His face was scattered with scars that seemed like nail marks, and his frame was gaunt and haggard, a decrepit state of being. From outside, the voices of the couple could be heard. It sounded to Sam as if they were discussing dinner plans. Unless their dinner hadn't taken place. It occurred to him they had barely touched the food. A notion of who this man could be hit him. Are you the son? Sam murmured. The words took a few seconds to register, but the man slowly nodded. The man creeped out from under the bed to Sam, picking up, whispering to him that they had to get out of there. He saw the man's hands clasped together with cuffs. You have to free me. Find an axe. The door was unlocked, and the two tiptoed to the bottom landing where the man instructed Sam to search the kitchen. Inside, he quietly ruffled through and saw a variety of weapons, including a crowbar, a chainsaw, knives, and the axe Sam was there to get. On his way back, his eyes fell on the stove where a stew was being prepared. The gas was still lit. There was something cooking. Sam felt sick at what or who it might be. Returning to the front door, Sam brought the axe between the man's hands, freeing him. The room's lights flicked on. Travis and Terry were there. Instantly, the sun charged into the kitchen and out of sight. Sam brandished the axe in the couple's face. "Stay back," he bellowed. Travis moved toward him. Sam swung the axe wildly at him, causing Terry to shriek and pull her husband behind. Feeling confident, he tossed a rope he'd found in the kitchen and ordered them to tie themselves up. When Travis didn't comply, Sam rammed the back of the axe in his face, breaking his nose, but making the terrified couple obey his commands. "We kept you. We fed you." Terry sobbed, as if it was Sam who had done something wrong. "You sick bastards. You kill people. You trap your own son." Sam screamed in deranged madness. "What? Son? Your son? You just saw him. He's not our son." "What? That's not our boy," Travis mumbled through the blood running down his face, his eyes moving toward the frame Sam had seen earlier. As he saw it now, there was someone else looking back at him through the picture. Someone who looked nothing like the man who had just gone into the kitchen. If he's not, then who is he? Sam trembled, the axe slipping through his fingers in horror. The sound of the door clicking shut behind them made all heads turn that way. The man, who had since emerged from the kitchen, stood upright, no sign of fatigue or distress. His hunger from before, however, burned through his eyes. In his hand, an enormous chainsaw spread terror in the room, which he whirred into life as the sounds of incoming death bellowed maddeningly around the walls. There was the smallest moment of silence in between, within which the man spoke. "You folks hear the news?" he asked, his face alight with glee as he roared the chainsaw to life and stepped forward. It was then that Sam thought he never should have knocked on the door of the house in the first place. When Travis and Terry's son returned from his service a few weeks later, he discovered the mangled corpses of his parents. They had been tied up and brutalized with what seemed to have been a chainsaw. Next to their bodies was the unidentified corpse of another man. Police speculated he might have been the accomplice of the chainsaw killer who had last been seen in the vicinity. Terry had informed the police that his parents had a habit of being too hospitable to potential guests and would prepare excess amounts of food. It was a decade later when the chainsaw killer was finally apprehended, when the identity of Sam was made known and he was posthumously cleared for the murder of the couple. The tunnel. We were brought over to explore the outskirts of the frontier for our science project with the intention to study the different kinds of rocks around the area. Me and my friend, Rashid, had no interest in this, but had come along to learn about the bloodsucker. This was a creature that had been famed for seemingly luring unsuspecting victims. Its name was derived from the fact that bodies were never found. The traces of blood were the only things ever recovered. Rashid and I weren't stupid. We didn't plan on going in the lair. All we wanted was to take a few pictures outside the tunnel where the bloodsucker's last victim was rumored to have disappeared and return to our group. While our teacher, Mrs. Morse, was rounding the students around with one of her usual "Here, kids" voice, Rashid and I slipped down the slope that led to the tunnel entrance. The walls around the opening were covered with markings left by previous visitors, some parts featuring curse words, some areas having the names of lovers. Right above the tunnel was a warning. This was perfect, and we took turns in snapping a shot with the warning words above us. We could hear our teacher's voice a fair distance away, having decided to go back once her voice couldn't be heard anymore. "Here, kids." Her voice, like a recording of a children's television host, could be heard faintly on frequent occasions, and the two of us screeched with laughter every time it reached our ears. By the sounds of it, it seemed like our teacher was set on using her catchphrase all night, so we were in no hurry to go back. However, Rashid stopped laughing. His face contorted with confusion, a kind of look that didn't convey simple perplexity. He seemed alarmed over something. Rashid brought a finger to his lips, then pointed somewhere behind me to listen closely. As my sniggers faded, I too heard what he wanted me to. "Here, kids." Mrs. Moore's voice, as before, arrived to our ears, but this time we didn't find it funny. She was calling to us from inside the tunnel. "Here, kids." Neither Rashid nor I made a move, but our teacher repeatedly called out for us. Looking back from where we come, there were no more sounds of anybody else either. It had to mean that Mrs. Morse was in there. "Here, kids." Part of me wanted to tear out of there, but the other part was rooted to the spot. Rashid slowly moved away from the entrance and climbed the rise toward where we come from. He came back the next moment, not needing to say what he'd seen. Absolutely nothing. In our recklessness, the two of us had failed to take note of the fact that the grounds were covered in total darkness. The only illumination was the crackling tube light above the tunnel entrance. There was nowhere we could go other than follow Mrs. Moore's voice. Rashid and I inched our feet ahead and took our first steps inside the tunnel. His phone flashed the only light through the torch feature. I was resenting Rashid for not loading his with credit and denying us the option to call someone. When we ventured deep enough to gather our thoughts, it was clear that the pathway split into two ways. Behind us, the entryway now stood a few good yards afar. Mrs. Moore's voice echoed around the walls once more. Neither of us could make out which side it was coming from. I'd reached the end of the facade I'd been putting up of my bravery and tugged on Rashid's sleeve to return back. A burgeoning sense of fright was boiling just beneath the surface of my lungs. "Here, kids." As I heard Mrs. Moore's voice again, I instinctively pulled Rashid away, but terror fully encapsulated me the next moment. The flickering light above the entrance shone no more. A cracking sound erupted. The light was gone the next instant. Even in the darkness, I knew Rashid was looking at me. We were both thinking it. Someone had shattered the tube light. This could only mean that if there indeed was someone else here, they were standing at the entrance. A splatter echoed from the other end, like feet hitting damp ground filled with water that reached a person's toes. It was the sound of footsteps. And they were getting closer. Faster. Rashid clenched his fingers around my bicep and tore to the side with me hurrying along in his wake. I could feel the steely sting of fear prickle the sides of my head, as if claws were scraping around my skin the very second. We'd turned through too many corners. We were lost. By the edge of the tunnel, I could see a faint glimmer of something hanging around the walls around the corner. They looked like vines swaying from a light breeze. It would have been our choice to head toward had it not been for Mrs. Moore's voice croaking once more. "Here, kids." This time her voice was laced with concern. The trouble was, it came from the opposite direction. Rashid fell, scratching the gravel below him. I watched as he kicked his feet and paddled toward the light at the end of the tunnel. When I attempted to lift him up, he slashed his nails toward me. "No!" Rashid hissed. "I'm leaving. I want to go home." He waddled along the dirt to reach the end of the tunnel while I stood rooted to the same spot. His lack of care for my decision made it clear that Rashid had effectively abandoned me. It was when this dawned on me that I noticed the splattering sounds had returned. Rashid was the one making them. Even in the near darkness, I could discern the color Rashid's skin was lathered with. It was unmistakably red. Its wetness sent shivers to my soul as I realized the blood had to be fresh. A low growl above us brought tremors to the tunnel, several pebbles fell from the ceiling. There was something move up there. Oh my God! I whimpered, falling on my back and pressing myself deep down. The silhouette of a creature was climbing the walls around us. It was circling me, and Rashid, this creature, was the one growling, a low hiss. It had its feet and palms dug on the walls, springing from one spot to the farthest end within seconds. I brought my hands to my mouth to stop myself from screaming. The creature had descended to where we were. It had capered toward Rashid. I will never forget the sounds of my friend's screams as he was dragged through the blood-stained mud, his mouth gurgling as if his screeches had torn his lungs out. The creature had one hand on Rashid's leg while the rest of its limbs grabbed the edges of the walls and carried Rashid deep into the tunnel. This was when I learned what I had thought to be vines had been chains. Rashid was hung up by his feet. I saw the shadows as Rashid was strung dangling to a chain that dropped from the ceiling, his screams never ending. I thundered the opposite way where I heard Mrs. Moore's, my eyes streaking with tears, my insides burning with unkempt horror. Over here things were once more cast into total darkness. I begged the silent air to bring me the sound of Mrs. Moore's voice, to have some indication that I wasn't alone. But she didn't speak back, and I was increasingly aware of the renewed tremors on the ground telling me I was about to have some bone-chilling company. I bellowed in the vast emptiness for someone's help, thinking it was the last chance for anyone to hear my voice. Just then, a hand clasped against my mouth. "Shush," the person breathed in my ear. They took the palm of my hand and propped me up to follow them. I had no clue where we were going, but I would have taken any help no matter who it was. The person tugged me away back toward the way where I'd lost Rashid, and I began resisting, scared that I was being taken to my demise. "No," the person boomed, and I fell still. This was Rashid's voice. "I want to go home." He had escaped. Somehow, some unexplainable way, he had managed to free himself, and now he was leading me to freedom as well. I obeyed his commands, allowing him to take me wherever after his incredible escape. Eventually, I realized we'd returned back toward the original entrance of the tunnel. We were almost out. I was near tears and relief when I heard Rashid respond in kind. His voice sounded far, somewhere much farther than where he was in front of me holding my hand. He didn't even sound as if he was in the same place as me. In fact, it didn't sound as if he was laughing. Rashid was shrieking, and the only other sound was the clanking of chains right next to his voice. He was uttering one word: help. Then, how could I have been walking with Rashid this whole time if he was back there? How was it that I was still holding someone's hand in mind? Someone who had now stopped walking, now that I realized it. The hand released me from its hold, the shift in the air telling me they were facing my way. And then, I heard the last person I expected to hear. "Here, kids." It was Mrs. Moore's voice. Unmistakable. Clear. Right where I was looking in the dark. "Here, kids." She repeated these words over and over again. That high-pitched, sweet voice rang around the walls, bouncing off them to rupture my eardrums. Only, the voice didn't stop there. "I want to go home." "Here, kids." "I want to go home." Rashid and Mrs. Moore's voices alternated within seconds, both of them uttered by the shape I was gazing at. Whether it was female or male, I couldn't know. The voices were seamless in transition. From behind the figure, I could still hear the anguished screams escaping the real Rashid. The figure's head moved in acknowledgement. It moved a few steps back toward the screams, and a solitary light emitted from between his hands. It was Rashid's phone. The torch had been turned on. And now I saw what the creature was. I saw that it was no creature. It was a man. A nude man with a large stomach and gleaming skin with patches of hair in place. His hair was trimmed and cut, looking nothing like someone who resided in a tunnel. Had he been donning clothes, I would never have taken him for the monster he was. And when he spoke then, he spoke with a clear voice, a voice of his own. "Come. If you want your friend, you can." Somehow, he had the ability to level his voice deep like a fully grown man, but could also pepper it with a mocking tone that pierced through me. "Stay, leave?" As I heard Rashid's cries for help, a paltry whiff of bravery flickered in me. I took a step forward, wanting to look at the man-creature in the eye. "Ah!" He cackled like a jester in court, as if wanting to amuse me with his laughter. I saw him move toward the side, dropping Rashid's phone which shone its light now at the ceiling. The man-creature's figure pinned itself to wall. Just then, the figure rose along the surface of the wall, moving upwards, looking like it had merged with the gravel and glided around. His cackles had now morphed into rapturous screams. He was perched on the ceiling, as if a supernatural force connected him there. "Ah!" The laughter morphed once more. It was demonic, as if the man-creature's own throat was being torn apart with his cries. Those fiendish cackles could only belong to a devilish creature, my mind told me. A being such as this could never exist on the same plane as us. My momentary bravery had been extinguished. The more steps I took back toward the tunnel entrance, the farther the figure went. He was moving toward the chains Rashid was strung on. Once I reached the entrance and back into open air, Rashid's cries exploded into the night. The fiend seemed to be feasting on his blood. I still remember Rashid's screeches of horror. I could imagine him being ripped apart each second. I was found unconscious the following morning by a search party far from the tunnel. My recollection ended in me galloping as fast as I could away, and I was certain I passed out from exhaustion. Rashid was never found. The tunnel had been searched from top to bottom. They confirmed Rashid's demise based on the only thing they found there, the blood on the floor that had been the remnants of the bloodsucker's feast. To this day, nobody believes what I saw. For a few years, people believed I had killed Rashid. Over time, I feel as if I did kill him. Had I summoned something reminiscent of courage, I might have saved him. Even if I perished, I wouldn't have had to live with the guilt of abandoning him and the knowledge that that creature or man or whatever he was still remained out there waiting to devour a fresh new victim in some forgotten tunnel.